We are talking Law, a 2023 British anthology movie. I say 2023, it was released on the festival circuit in 23, but it's getting a general release in 2024. Now, this is an anthology with a wraparound story that stars Richard Brake from Game of Thrones, among other genre fare, and has 4 individual stories. So the wraparound story is effectively a group of 4 campers go on a kind of a horror experience where they're camping with some type of supernatural element, and Richard Brake is kind of the tour guide, and he effectively gets them to tell ghost stories around a campfire. And then obviously the stories they tell are the 4 segments of our anthology. So let's talk about the 4 segments, and then we'll talk about the movie in a whole. Now, interestingly, with this anthology movie, the stories are quite varied in both tone and subject matter. For example, you'll get a monster movie, you'll get a ghost one, you'll get a kind of Wicker Man style cult movie, and you'll get a slasher film. So plenty of variety in the kind of the horror ideas. And the tone is, a couple of them are kind of more serious and a couple of them are more comedic. So a good mix, first of all. If you like a little bit of variety, this is a nice little variety pack here. So the first film is the kind of the monster one, and this one stars Andrew Lee Potts, who you may know from the TV show Primeval. He has been in a variety of kind of lower budget horror and sci-fi movies as well. And this is about a guy who's being chased by 2 loan sharks, and he kind of runs into this sort of industrial area, like a warehouse or something, and there he sees there is some type of creature lurking in the shadows that attacks his assailants. And ultimately, what's he gonna do? So this one, you got good practical VFX in regards to the monster. You know, it's fairly kind of gory in regards to its admittedly limited kills. Andrew Lee Potts, I think, is you know, quite a good actor, to be honest with you. And we've got a kind of a nice little relationship between him and the security guard, who he kind of ends up sort of trying to get him to help, and who he feels somewhat of a kinship with. So that I kind of all quite liked. This movie, like all of them, I felt ends the same way. That's the one thing I would say with this movie as a whole, but it starts with this one. All of the films kind of end the same way. Now, I'm not going to tell you what the ending is, but yeah, they kind of end more or less the same. And this one especially, I have to say, lends itself to be less of a horror thing and more of a terrestrial psychological issue, is all I'll say. So ultimately, it somewhat deflates the horror elements out of it. You know, well put together, and the creature is interesting, but we're giving no explanation with it and with what the actual creature is, or what it's doing there, outside of the more terrestrial explanation that is hinted at, which I think makes it a lot less interesting, to be honest. So there's that one. The second one is the ghost story. Now, so this is probably my favourite one, and this is where a single mother and a child end up in this particular house, which I think is the grandmother's, and there is a ghost of this kind of ballerina in there, and it's effectively done. It's lower budget, but there are some pretty decent sort of spooky and scary moments with this ballerina ghost. The way it moves is they've made it very unnatural, and I think it really benefits from having this kind of like sort of ratchety feel to it, where it's kind of moving around, kind of dancing, but it's like a doll almost, and quite often it's motionless and just kind of stands there. So that I thought was it was pretty effective. The issues I have with this one, again, it kind of more or less ends the same way, as I've said, but also this is one of those instances where you have a character in the mother that sees supernatural stuff on more than one occasion, and she kind of just, doesn't really react to it. It's a typical kind of movie reaction to seeing horror elements on screen where, they're not particularly kind of freaked out by it and just seem to be okay with it and just chalk it up to something. But if we are led to believe she saw what we see as the audience, then you would be like, panic, inconsolable. You wouldn't be able to control your emotions. So it's kind of one of those. The other thing with this particular segment is it's really just a kind of a reel of cliches that you've seen in ghost films. There's some type of potential haunted object that the mother throws out in the trash. The next day it's back there again. Doors that won't open, things like that. It's kind of very much just tropes that you've seen in haunted house movies up until this point. So it's not particularly original, but it is effective, I would say, in its scarier moments and its kind of spookier atmosphere that I kind of quite liked. And again, I thought the acting was sort of solid here, outside of, I say, the way this character is written, seemingly to have no genuine fear reactions, which is a complaint I often have with movies. So then we get our next one, which is the first of the comedic ones. And this is where we have this couple that seemingly meet up with another couple to have some type of swinger party in this kind of hotel. And it focuses on this one guy who's a little bit of a sleaze. And it appears there is more to this swingers party than meets the eye. And it's actually some type of cult doing shenanigans. And again, it kind of ends the same way as all of these movies do. This one seems a little short to me. And it is kind of, it's amusing. I don't think it's as funny as the last movie. But it's okay. I wasn't really sure. Again, it doesn't really give you much explanation about what these people are actually doing. Like, what are these cultists actually doing? What's their purpose? Don't know. And this is one of the problems with anthology movies. The ideas just are not fleshed out because they're obviously the short running time. So again, we're seeing these weird cultists, but we don't know what it is they're doing and why it is they are doing certain things. And the relationship between our main couple, again, it wasn't. You get the idea that they're a couple, but I was kind of thinking, how long have they been together? It doesn't give you that much information about it. And then the last one, I think, was my second favourite, I think. And this is quite a meta one if you're a film fan. And it's about this trio of friends that are going to a midnight premiere of this B-movie horror film. And when they go there, they're served by this really tall guy who's getting berated by his manager for messing up the till or something. And this guy snaps and ultimately puts on a mask and starts killing people. So this is very much like a comedic meta one, and it's quite fun. I think the tone here is, it's very appreciative of its audience, and kind of it knows that the characters depicted in this movie are probably somewhat representative of people who will like this movie. They're in this cinema. We got another guy who's watching the film who's a bit of a cinemaphile, bit of a cinema snob, things like that. It's kind of quite fun taking shots at cinephiles and just the way these kind of characters are interacting. I thought it was really good. I thought the trio of our main protagonists was great. I thought they had great interplay. Really kind of sold you on the fact that these three were friends. With their banter and their interaction, that I kind of quite liked. I quite like the fact that you almost see the origin of a serial killer right in front of us. Again, one of the problems is with these short form films is that we don't really get too much backstory, because it seems somewhat of an overreaction. If we're being honest, again, had we had a longer format, you might have had a bit more context as to about. Was this a kind of a thing that was built up, or was it just one instance then and he's kind of snapped? But yeah, there's some decent VFX in this one. The killer is he's about 7 foot tall the way he's depicted here, so he's quite intimidating. You know, and even with this short runtime of this, I was kind of like, you know, I wanted our protagonists to come out on top of this one, because you know, it did a good job of kind of selling you on these sort of characters. There are some quite sort of amusing scenes, but even so, it still is probably the goriest out of all of them. As I say, the critiques here, again, it kind of ends the same way as all these films. All four of these shorts pretty much end the same way. And as I said, again, it just suffers in the lack of the explanation about this killer, because you just feel like it's a little bit shortchanged in regards to the reasons why that's sort of happened. And also, there's a small little like niggles with this one. They're trapped in this cinema. I mean, there's fire, except, you know, you've got like they can't get out the fire doors, but there'll be fire alarm panels that they could press and obviously sort of call for help and stuff like that. So that's never sort of addressed. We don't know why the fire doors won't open. There's a few things here that just seem a little bit like meh. And then the actual kind of the wraparound story as a whole, you know, we've got Richard Brake acting kind of spooky, but I didn't really feel it amounted to much. I mean, there is a post-credits scene, but again, I didn't really feel it was, you know, it's effective enough as a kind of just a framing device, but it's almost trying to tell its own story, which I didn't really feel like it amounted to very much. So overall, I think this movie is flawed in regards to some of its, you know, the way it's telling these sort of stories. They each have some issues, but there's not a bad film in any of these. They're all quite enjoyable, even if some of them are a little bit predictable, a little bit you've kind of seen it before, and a little bit, you know, have some individual kind of like issues here and there. They're overall still all pretty good, all worth watching, I would say. So it makes it for an enjoyable but flawed anthology. So I'll give this one an above average score. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? Well, do you think of it? Please leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.